Give that spinner one moment. It says recording will start soon. Should we just trust that it will actually start soon and
Yeah,
get going?
it says recording for me.
It says recording. Okay. Well, there's a spinner, so hopefully it gets recorded to the cloud or to my computer. Cool. Okay, so hopefully you can see this presentation. What we're going to do today is we are going to run through the kind of Q2 Livepeer highlights and state of the network and network usage and stats, talk about some accomplishments. Then we'll spend some time talking about the latest that's going on in the protocol updates and the governance proposals. And I think there's one proposal that's gotten a lot of attention around adjusting the inflation rate in Livepeer. But it's been pretty technical discussion and GitHub and whatnot. This call will be a good chance to talk about where it's at the high level and have the opportunity for discussion and Q&A around that as well. And of course, if anyone has any questions along the way, please interrupt me. If there's questions in the chat or in Discord, please shout them out. My view is just of my presentation, so I might not see if someone is kind of visually prompting or if there's something in the chat. So yeah, don't hesitate to interrupt and shout out. Cool. Okay, so what's gone on in Livepeer in the past 3 months? I guess we're now at the end of July, so really the past 4 months or so. Start off by taking a look at the network. So there's currently 2,635 active delegators on the network. This might be a couple weeks out of date. That's up 62 from previous. So that there were some that were lost along the way. We've added more than we've lost. It continues to grow, but this is not tremendous growth. And I'm looking forward to some of the kind of announcements we'll share and media work that we're going to do to start telling the story of Livepeer usage in the coming quarter to attract more people to the network. There's 46 active orchestrators. These are people who are in the active set and activated and calling reward each day. This is up 3 from where we were previously. There's still slots for up to 100, and anyone can be activated with as little as 1 base unit Livepeer token. So I think especially as usage is starting to tick up, there's the opportunity to compete for and earn fees. It would be great to expand this set, particularly in some locations around the world that don't have as good coverage as they should, and we'll have people be in a good position to win work in those regions if streams originate there from some of the users that are coming online. The network's up to over a 68% participation rate. We know that the magic number is 50%, so as long as we are above 50%, the inflation on the network continues to tick down. So that has been happening and will continue to happen, and is kind of the subject of the inflation change proposal. Stats related to usage and fees. So there's been 921 winning tickets in the probabilistic micropayments protocol. This is the way that nodes earn money. They've earned collective 12.4 ETH worth of fees. So map that on to what's represented in a few thousand plus USD. Obviously, we want to get to much higher scale than that, but that's not a trivially small number either. That's a significant amount of usage, and it's just beginning. And then over on the right side, you see the fees that the Livepeer.com API has paid into the network so far, just over the last couple of weeks here. So you look at rounds ticking back to around 1,800 when this came online and began paying fees. It's paid 1.3 fees worth of each ETH, and we're tracking kind of the fees paid each day there. And again, as more customers begin to use Livepeer.com, we'll want to see these numbers going up. Cool. So speaking of Livepeer.com, if you've never seen it, you should check it out. We've always had Livepeer.org, which is the home for the kind of the open project, the open network, token holders, the supply side community, open source developers, all our assets around the protocol. But we also now have Livepeer.com, which features products and services to kind of abstract away all the crypto complexity and blockchain and make it really easy for video developers to onboard onto Livepeer. And recently we released a beta version of an open streaming API. So anyone building an application can use Livepeer for not just the bare bones transcoding to plug in, but they can actually get started quickly with full streaming and have the content delivery layered on top and the ingest and some of the more trickier aspects of video. And we have kind of big refresh coming of the website that communicates these value props, makes it easy to sign up, introduces pricing, and we've had the first users begin to onboard to livepeer.com. So you can actually check it out. You can sign up and register for an API key, and you can go through the flow of getting Stream up and running. Definitely ping us, talk to us. I know Eric was working on a more developer-centric API doc to get started, a quick start from developer perspective, and we'll productize that as well. So that's super exciting, and it's beginning to drive some usage. Here's just a screenshot of manually creating streams and API keys and whatnot, which of course you can do programmatically as well. Cool. So this is exciting news that I shared in the Discord, but we're going to be putting together some PR and talking to the media. Is that we have users beginning to onboard. So I recommend people check out playdj.tv, which is a super cool user-generated streaming platform. DJs stream their sets live through playdj.tv. This is using Livepeer for all its transcoding, and we'll tell the story in a kind of larger case study with all the value props and impacts that we've made to them and whatnot. But the short version is that PlayDJ had a super successful beta, but the cost of running infrastructure were really high. They couldn't afford to scale their business until they found Livepeer, and one of the media servers were integrated with Mist server. And through that combination, they were able to relaunch, begin getting paid signups, growing their business. And if you check it out, there'll be anywhere between 0 and 10 active streams of DJs around the world streaming their experience. And this is the exact example of the type of app that can really leverage Livepeer and can grow to hundreds or thousands of streams concurrently as a result of the infrastructure. Really excited about it and excited to onboard more users, which are in various phases of kind of testing, staging, development going forward. And that's what's going to be driving a lot of the usage through the Livepeer API that uses the Livepeer network under the hood for all of the video transcoding. So yeah, check it out, playdj.tv, listen to some tunes, say hello. Cool, here's just another screenshot of PlayDJ. Update on the community grants. There's been a few grants that have been given lately. One is related to this blockchain hackathon called the Spark Hackathon, where the goal of the Livepeer grant there is to get teams to use Web3 plus live streaming to benefit the world as it exists today. I think through the combination of the socially distanced world we live in and the rise of live streaming with COVID-19, I think there's a lot of streaming tools that can be built to better impact people's lives. I also think with the super important social justice movements that are going on, live streaming plays a really valuable role in getting kind of the truth out about what's happening on the ground in the various locations with the protests and surfacing injustices and whatnot. And so we have a grant out at inspiring developer teams over kind of an 8-week-long hackathon to take on projects in this vein. Another community grant was given to Biddle Labs and I think Basement Studios to work on a Filecoin plus Livepeer integration. I think you can view the details in the grants repo. But Filecoin is going live shortly. It serves as a hopefully reliable backend for storage for video and is capable of serving video content in a streaming manner, and Livepeer handles the video side. So we think that's a powerful combination. Exciting to see a demo application that'll serve both as a something useful, but also as a kind of starting point for other developers that want to build Web3 enabled video applications that need a storage component. So that's exciting. And then I know the community grants team has a track where they're beginning to experiment with kind of increasing liquidity of the Livepeer token through DeFi protocols, looking at things like Hummingbot, looking at things like Balancer, looking at other protocols that can help get access to the Livepeer token for people who want to run infrastructure, are running infrastructure, and need to liquidate some in order to cover costs, which I know is something that's important to the community. I'll just pause for a second if anyone on the community grants board wants to add anything here or elaborate.
I think that's a pretty good overview. I would just say that there's a spreadsheet that the community, the committee has shared in the GitHub. There's a link in the GitHub repo that kind of outlines all the grants that have been given to date. So over time, in the last 3 to 4 months, we've given out $20,000 worth of LPT, which that was kind of the Q2 goal for us. And going forward, we're setting a new goal for I actually forgot what the goal is, but there's a new goal of the amount of LPTs that are given out in the next quarter.
Great, thanks, Eric. So as with many things in Livepeer, a lot of the information lives in GitHub, and people can find it. It's all open and accessible, but we can do a better job of kind of packaging it up to make it marketable, telling the story to a wider audience, and that's also going to be a priority for us coming forward in the next quarter. Now that we have real usage and are beginning to ramp up adoption. Cool. So related to token liquidity, a couple of things I wanted to highlight. On the left, you see a screenshot of Balancer liquidity pool. In case you're not aware of it, Balancer is a new automated market making protocol. It enables anyone to add liquidity, aka deposit Livepeer token and another asset, and the underlying protocol will make a market that allows people to buy and sell it, and the price will adjust automatically according to demand and supply. There's a couple of interesting things here. One is that this is entirely DeFi. It's entirely open and permissionless, so it doesn't require exchange listing fees or relationships or any regulatory risk associated with representing this as an investment or anything. And so community members have taken it upon themselves to add a pretty significant amount of liquidity, and this is actually one of the best places you can easily get or sell LPT without a significant slippage and a reasonably moderate volume. So it's a great starting point for this, combined with Uniswap as an entry point for Livepeer token through the DeFi world. I know might be some people on the call who have some deeper experiences or thoughts with Balancer. If anyone wants to jump in and share anything, I think it would totally be worthwhile.
Hey, thanks, Doug. I love Balancer. I'm an investor in Balancer, and I've done a ton of work on modeling Balancer pools, understanding the incentives, the risks. If anyone has any questions whatsoever about how Balancer pools work, hit me up on Twitter, DM, email, whatever. We can chat about it.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, one thing Jake pointed out that is also interesting I should mention is this is maybe the first example of a use case for LPT where you're actually earning yield, I guess is the term, that rivals or exceeds the yield you'd earn through the inflation of staking LPT. We've never seen that before, so therefore everyone with LPT has been directly staking it. Whereas here, if you deposit it into a Balancer liquidity pool, you're actually earning some Balancer token, which has a role in the Balancer protocol and a value associated with it that, again, could be considered as higher yield than the LPT through staking. And so now that there's kind of alternate uses for Livepeer token that may exceed the rate of returns people are getting, it'll be interesting to see if we see some more liquidity in the system as opposed to all the token just locked up through staking. Cool. The second thing I just wanted to mention is people may have seen that Coinbase named Livepeer as one of the assets that they're considering adding support for on their custody and exchange platforms. It's they kind of announce everything that's being evaluated and considered. They certainly have a limited amount of capacity and have to prioritize that list accordingly. But I think it's a good recognition that of all the work we've done over the past few years, that they consider this to be a solid asset backed by real world usage, and that it's here to stay. And it would definitely be a positive affirmation of all of Livepeer's work if they go ahead and support it, because that would open up Livepeer to a huge potential user base. And so we'll continue to answer any questions they have about the token and support them as they make their evaluation and consider adding it now or in the future. Cool. Okay. So that's all the project updates. I wanted to move on to a quick governance update, and then there's one topic that if people want to discuss or ask questions, we can spend a little time on. Cool. So I think everyone may have known from previous call and previous quarter, the decentralized governance process is activated, right? We have a noted process by which people can make proposals to update Livepeer protocol, parameters, governance. There's forums for discussion. There's a process to move these into formal proposals and move them from the feedback stage all the way to the voting phase. And there's an application to actually have token holders cast their votes. So this process has been ratified, and now we're actually starting to see the first kind of proposals outside of the initial one move through the process, which is really cool. There's really 3 different active proposals that are moving close to voting, and I think they're all impactful in different ways. The first one, LIP25, is a step on the governance roadmap. It's a technical proposal that makes it possible for the protocol to be controlled by smart contracts and various rules that can be set, as opposed to just being controlled by kind of the Livepeer core team account, which is a super important step in achieving full decentralization. So this one's technical. It hasn't really been controversial. It's more just about getting the code and design right and in a secure way. So anyone interested in kind of technical governance can take a look at that one. LIP36 is something I think everyone's been asking for kind of behind the scenes, which is reducing the gas costs for claiming earnings. Right now, gas costs on Ethereum are tremendous. I've seen it over 100 lately. It used to be down to 1 or 2. So it's 100 times more expensive to claim your earnings on Livepeer, and to call reward on the network can cost up to $15 per day. So we're really in need of some gas cost reductions, and Yanin has driven this kind of mathematical based formulation for how we can do all the protocol accounting and calculations without putting so much computation burden on the users, and has an interesting proposal out for this. So that one again might be more under the hood, but I think it shouldn't be too controversial and should have a huge impact for users. So excited to push that through. The one that I think is really interesting, that's not so behind the scenes but actually impacts all the Livepeer token holders front and center, is a proposal that's being championed by Victor and the Bison Trails team. And this is a proposal to actually adjust the speed at which Livepeer inflation increases or decreases. And there's a kind of technical component about math precision behind the scenes. So there's two proposals combined into one. So we can discuss this for a few minutes, but before we discuss it, I want to highlight the fact that it's moved pretty far along in the process, and it's currently about 7 or 8 days into the last call period, which is kind of the last call for feedback where it would be adjusted before it goes to a vote. And so there's actually a little time sensitivity and urgency to understand this and weigh in and discuss it and suggest changes if you feel strongly about that. So now would be a good time for people to get an overview and ask any questions. And we can talk about the last one if we have time at the end, which is not an LIP yet. Cool. Okay. So I could give a brief overview, but I think Victor's on the call. Victor, do you want to, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to give a brief summary of this proposal?
Sure. And maybe one thing I'll say before I even get into the summary is that there's no obligation to move directly out of last call into a vote like the very next second. And so if you have some great thoughts, would love to hear them here, and would also love to see them written out in the discussion thread as well. Would love to address them, would love to think about them, would love to incorporate as much feedback as possible. And so if you have something really burning, feel free to say it here, but also please don't hesitate to add it to the thread. But obviously if nobody says something, we're gonna move to a vote faster. So you have 2 days to write something out.
Why not move it from 3 to 1 instead of 3 to a half?
Yeah, so I looked at the math of what would happen. So maybe I'll go through it first, and then I'll answer that right after. So the proposal is to move from 3 to a half. What the 3 and the half, what those numbers are, is just the speed at which the rate of inflation changes. And so with every round that passes, every day, the inflation changes by, I think it was 0.0003. I believe it's the right number of zeros. Up or down, depending on where the participation rate is relative to the target staking rate. And so by changing it to 0.5, you're essentially getting about an 83% reduction in the speed of change. And so we're not changing, we're not changing about how the inflation mechanism works. We're not changing the minimums or the maximums of the what inflation could be. We're just saying hey, it will just take a little bit longer to get to its final value, or whatever value. And what that essentially does is, the more immediate change is that currently Livepeer is on track to hit a 0% rate of inflation in, I believe, early December of this year. And so it's coming up very, very soon. And what it does is it extends that timeline into 2022. It says late 2022. It does depend on when we actually pass it. And so if we do end up delaying discussion a little bit further before putting it to a vote, that changes. And you can look at the issue 34 there. They kind of show some of the targets of if it passes August 1st or September 1st, to get a feel for it. And yeah, it's in last call now. So why a value of 0.5 as opposed to 1? Well, I took a look at the math, and essentially changing it to 1 only extends the timeline by about a year, or maybe a little bit less than a year, if I remember correctly. And you can check the issue. And what it ended up doing was, I was kind of doing mental math in my head where, okay, obviously at 0, it's not going to, people aren't going to be earning rewards, and so it's not going to be cost effective to run infrastructure. But there's also some period of time before that where the interest rate is 0.5% or 1%, where it's still not really cost efficient unless you're one of the largest nodes. And so I factored that into my estimates, where I'm okay, it's going to start becoming difficult to run infrastructure for several months before it actually hits 0. So when accounting for that, is changing it to 1 enough of a change to give enough runway? And the conclusion that I was coming to from my analysis was, the answer was no. And so I figured that if we could extend a little bit longer by making it 0.5, which did require a little bit of a technical change, then it gave me more comfort.
And may I ask one more question?
Of course.
And maybe this is one for Doug and Yondon, maybe, I don't know. Is it technically possible to reduce the inflation change parameter to 0?
Yes.
And Victor, have you considered the idea of reducing it to 0?
I actually have not. I'm glad you mentioned it. I would say that like my initial thought on it would be, I am a big believer in that inflation should be 0. Like I think the rate of inflation, like regardless of what the change in the rate of inflation is, I do think that I want all networks to move to 0 inflation or very close to 0 inflation. I do want all networks to be self-sufficient with fees, or at least like that's my maybe that's like the Bitcoin maximalist in me speaking up. But when I look at the Livepeer model, I do think that the way that the model is like works. I do agree that the rate of inflation should be lower than it is today. I don't know what the final rate is or what the final economics should look like, but I do think that I would like to make sure this proposal stays as close and as true as possible to the currently defined economic policy or monetary policy before we make like any more bigger changes.
Cool. I want to just congratulate you on your work. It's been excellent on this stuff, really detailed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have any additional questions or comments? And if you don't right now, that's totally okay as well. Like please leave them in the thread, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible.
I have kind of a question, and I'm sorry if I'm behind on reading the thread if this has been covered already, but my kind of question is, so I get the case for like I love the simplicity of the proposal, but what it does obfuscate a little bit is just kind of the the truth of like, well, how many units are we actually like generating? And so I was curious like why you approached this that way versus just saying like, oh, why don't we just extend the inflation by like n number of units more for another K years or whatever.
I don't think I understand. Can you say that again? Sorry.
What I'm saying is like the number of units that will be inflated between now and 0 is kind of a mathematical reality based on just like this parameter that you shift. And I'm curious why not just go to a simpler proposal where you say, this is the number of units we're going to generate between now and like 2023, and like that's it.
I think that the reason I haven't really considered those is I actually don't know if I don't know if we're in the right place to make decisions around what the rewards should be even in the next year, or like much less in the next 3 years. I do think that in general, I don't think that the monetary policy that Livepeer has right now is the correct one long term. I think that Livepeer was on the bleeding edge of setting a target participation rate and like figuring out how everything works. And so there's like a number of kind of like automatic improvements that I would make to it, such as like maybe 50% is too low. It's not really what we see on other networks. Maybe having a lower bound of 0 and no upper bound is like not really the right thing, and you want some bounds. Or maybe you want to like completely reevaluate how you incentivize behavior and how do you incentivize not only the ability to produce work, but actually producing work and so on. And so I think that the answer to, questions of like, of those kinds of questions should come once we have real usage on the network. And so like real transcoding, real broadcasting in some size. And so my expectation is that sometime within the next year, hopefully, like as usage picks up, we will take, or maybe like 1.5 years, we will take another closer look at it, and like then make a bigger decision around like how we want rewards to work and how we want the incentive model to work. Like I have no idea what's going to happen in 2023.
That's fair. So another quick question is like, there's kind of an implicit assumption in the proposal that participation rate will remain above the target participation rate. Can you just talk a little bit about that and what happens if that assumption is violated?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll break that up into two. So the reason I think that that is unlikely to happen is just because of like the sheer number of tokens that would need to be unstaked in order to get it below. And so last I checked, and this is in the proposal, and so if I get these numbers wrong, please correct me. The right numbers are in there. I believe it was something like 17% of the network, which is like more than 10 million tokens, had to be unstaked in order to get under the target staking rate, which is a really astronomical figure, given that there's there's not really a lot of liquidity for Livepeer. There's not a ton of venues in which you can deposit Livepeer, other than obviously like some of the balancer and other DeFi stuff that's just starting to sprout up. But we have never seen that rate of unbonding on any network that we've looked at, other than networks that were going through like essentially catastrophic failures, right? And so like when Loom was falling apart, a lot of people were unstaking and stopping participating, and so that's probably like the most salient example. And so I think it would just be like knowing the Livepeer token holders as we do, they're very long-term focused, and we are as well. And so I don't really expect a ton of sell-off. And even if there was, like the Livepeer really has nowhere to go, just because there's not a ton of liquidity. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is when we look at other networks such as Polkadot. Polkadot is a really good example in that their target staking rate is 50%. As soon as you go over it, the inflation rate just falls off a cliff, like really, really aggressively. But what we've seen on Kusama and what we're seeing now on Polkadot is that, yes, sure, like the reward rate that you get at 50% versus the reward rate that you get at 55% are like drastically different. Like you want to be at the 50% mark because it's like twice as much. But even when it drops, people don't really change their behavior, and like they'll accept any rate of reward because they're not doing anything else with their assets. And I do think that because Livepeer token holders are in a very similar mindset where they believe in the project long term, and so they're not they're willing to accept any rate of return, because like what else are they going to do with it? And so because of that, I don't see a way for the staking rate to get below the target participation rate, yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, but like what happens if it does, right? Well, what happens if it does, and this proposal passes, let's just say, then the inflation rate will start to rise again. But one of the nice things is that I would very much like to avoid going back to an inflation rate of like 100% or a reward rate of 100%, like 150%. I do think those are extremely high. And so I think one of the nice things is that if it passes and then the participation rate goes below the staking rate, and so you're going under 50%, then the inflation rate will start to rise back up, which will be like, in some ways nice, in some ways not nice. But the nice thing is that it won't rise up as quickly. And so the market will have more time to react, like the team will have more time to react, and different users of Livepeer, whether it's orchestrators or transcoders or broadcasters, or infrastructure providers in general, will have like more of a opportunity to formulate a strategy and an opinion and react to it.
And I'm just going to fact check you there as well. I did some maths, Victor, and right now to get below 50% participation, there would need to be 3.8 million Livepeer tokens unbonded.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
No, you're welcome.
I tend to agree with them. Sorry, you go, Jake.
No, I was just saying, thanks, Victor. That answers my question, and I appreciate your work on it.
I was just going to ask to, like, I guess the community, does anyone have any sort of thesis for why the participation rate would drop that suddenly? Because I think we've seen use cases like Balancer, and that there could be others where maybe LPT was used as collateral. But I think, as Victor mentioned, you wouldn't be able to get the stake rate or the fees flowing to the network. So, yeah, I guess that's one of the questions I've kind of had is, even like if the inflation rate was at 0, I just wonder if the sort of 50% participation rate works as it was sort of originally designed to.
Yeah, it might not, right? It might be that was a number that was selected in order to bootstrap the network and to generate enough interest on the supply side to kind of have reliable transcoding capacity, people running nodes, et cetera, as the rewards were rising. But there was also this thesis that there would be alternative uses generated for the Livepeer token, Liquidity being one, DeFi being the other, Livepeer tokens being used in other protocols built around the Livepeer ecosystem, just the same way ETH is used, in many different protocols built on the Ethereum ecosystem. And so, certainly some of that is the case, but it hasn't been anywhere near the 50% number, which means, these adjustments, like what we're talking about right now, are the right governance decisions to be considering, right? And so is it you need a higher participation rate? Is it you need a slower inflation change? Is it you need a different curve besides just this constant inflation change to actually adjust the inflation to ensure you have the right participation? Or do you want to propose, more drastic outside of the box measures and alternative uses of the token? I think, these things couldn't be addressed until there was a clear governance process in place. And now that there is, this is the right forum to address them. All right, so thanks for driving that discussion for 10, 15 minutes here on the call. One last question I'd ask is just a quick technical check, not to put Yanin on the spot, but I know he's kind of the technical champion of the small change that needs to be made to the protocol. Something people might be interested in is what the timeline might look like from, let's say, where we are today to being comfortable that we could, if it passed, that we could execute the technical change in order to support moving the parameter down to the 0.5 number.
Yeah, so my current thought is that, well, for starters, the technical change is very small in scope in terms of actual lines of code changed. It's, I think, 2 or 3. So the actual scope of changes is very small. There's a little more complexity in the deployment procedure, but the actual scope of the technical changes is quite small. So given that, I think it's likely appropriate for these technical changes to not go through an external security audit process, but rather go through a security due diligence process with the Livepeer team, as well as any interested community members. And I think so I think there's like 2 days left in the last call period. I think this is something that, given like maybe half a week, would be able to develop confidence in the changes and proceed from there.
Great. Okay. So, process-wise, if the last call period comes to an end, there's no more changes based on feedback that the champion Victor wants to make. It moves to proposed status. And from that point, anyone technically can create the poll to enable the token holder voting, but the time to do that might be after the technical confidence in the change is kind of indicated by those who participate in the review. Again, just a 2 or 3 line code change, but we'd want to look at all the ramifications. And then we could see a vote on this, and then a quick activation if the vote passes. So looking at something that could be activated in the next 2 to 3 weeks potentially. Great. Well, thanks everyone for the good discussion on that topic. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on governance topics? No, great. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just
Oh, yeah,
one.
go ahead.
I want to applaud you, Doug, for spearheading this whole governance thing. Like you are like the Speaker of the House, and it's very cool.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for participating and for everyone who participates. And in particular, I'm really excited about the way the inflation change proposal is moving through the governance process, because it's not something that I spearheaded. It's not something that I've even advocated for or against. It's been entirely everyone in the community chiming in, participating, driving it, with a lot of the work led by Victor and the Bison crew as well. Decentralized governance in action.
Thank you for making space for it in this call. Decentralized governance in action. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So outside of governance, Livepeer in general, any topics that people want to share, present, discuss, ask questions about?
Any other like new clients or customers who are testing Livepeer, that you can reveal?
So yes, there are more who are at various stages of testing and development. I don't want to be the one to reveal them, because it's kind of their own companies, projects, etc. So it's up to them when they launch or when they want to be revealed. I hope we can share some good news about a bigger one soon. On the livepeer.com side, we've been focusing on user-generated content platforms, things that look like Twitch, where the users are the ones creating the streams and there are many streams of content. And so I think those are the types of applications, just like Play DJ, that you might see driving a lot of the usage. But then kind of on the open source build directly on Livepeer, I think if you pay attention in the chat room, you see a few projects that have been hacking around it. And I'm pretty excited about what the combination of Livepeer plus Filecoin and Livepeer plus the Cyan network could represent in terms of an actual full stack streaming solution that's entirely decentralized, and we'll see some Web3 development on top of that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get to just say, yes, check out these 3 big applications, but soon, hopefully we can say that.
Thank you.
Yep. Great. Well, if there's no other big topics, then we can wrap this one up. I would note that those who are interested in the governance discussion, we do host bi-weekly LIP calls, Livepeer Improvement Proposal calls. It's with the core developers and the champions of any issues. So for those who are like really actively paying close attention, but if you're interested in getting involved, drop a line in the Discord, and anyone's welcome to join those as well. I think they're recorded and streamed. And the new website that's being worked on has a nice place to surface all these community calls and discussions that are going on as well. So coming soon. A lot to do, but a lot of fun stuff happening. Well, all right. Well, thanks, everyone. I will stop the recording now, and we can wrap up, and we'll see you in Discord, forum, Twitter, and elsewhere.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Doug.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Doug, as always.
Thanks, Doug. See you.
See you, Alex.